1. The Wall That Blinked. Trouble doesn't always start with a sudden sense of well-being and the smell of warm chocolate croissants. But then again, sometimes it does. Maya Davidson, almost 13, was walking along the Avenue Rap under the leafless Parisian late October trees, and the croissants sang out in small, sugary, buttery voices from within their twists of white paper, and with every step she took, those letters in her pocket that had just come today reminded her of their presence by crinkling a little. And Maya herself felt, well, how exactly did she feel? She wrapped her arms around her wool-jacketed self and considered the question for a moment, smiling, while her breath made thin clouds in the air. One thing was clear. She was not the same girl she had been 3 months ago. No, things had happened. She had changed. In fact, so many things had happened that if an old, out-of-date version of Maya, the Maya from way back in June, were to show up suddenly on this very sidewalk, probably looking pretty freaked out, thought Maya, to find herself suddenly whooshed all the way from California to this big French city, it would be pretty hard to explain any of it without sounding, to be honest, kind of loopy. Dad took that laboratory job in Paris. That much would make sense to the old, out-of-date Maya. That was the kind of thing that happens sometimes to people when their wonderful, beloved, misguided mothers, who have always wanted to live in France, who have always, always so very much dreamed of spending time in that magical old city, what an opportunity for the children, are finally getting better after having been so sick for way too long. Maya's father did take the job in Paris. It really happened. Paris, by the way, is very far from California, and when you are dragged 6,000 miles from home and plonked into the local school, you notice pretty fast that in Paris, everyone in school speaks French. So that was hard, but not as hard as you think it's going to be, said Maya in October to old Maya from June. You'll do okay. It's the other things that happen. Because it turns out that Paris really is an old and magical city, and sometimes the magic sneaks up and holds you tight and will not let you go. Sometimes an evil, beautiful uncle will show up out of nowhere and try to trap you in some terrible spell just so that he can go on his wicked ways forever and ever. Uncle? Said old Maya from June. What uncle? And did you just say spell, like in old fairy tales about princesses and frogs and stuff? Are you nuts? I know it sounds weird, said new Maya from now, but listen. So this Henri de Fourcroy, who was sort of their uncle, had even had the gall to kidnap Maya's impossibly likable baby brother, James, so that he could drain him of his charm. Kidnap? Said Maya from then to Maya from now. James? You let that happen? You're the one who's supposed to take care of James. That made Maya stop in her tracks for a moment, remembering how it had felt that horrible, awful, terrible day, which wasn't when you thought about it very many days ago. Last Saturday. It took her smile right away, remembering that, because Maya from then was right. It was always Maya who was supposed to take care of James. And I did take care of him, said Maya to herself, finding her footing again. I found him. I rescued him. I saved him. I did. But of course it got pretty strange. It was the fairy tale stuff again, only for real. She, Maya, had had to foil the plans of that wicked old Henri de Fourcroy. She herself had reached through the glass into the cabinet of earths and pulled out that bottle of his, where everything that had been mortal in him had been hidden so safely for so many long years, and time had caught up with him again and made him old. So now he was withered away and gone. The cabinet of whats? Maya from then was saying, somewhere in the background now. What was that you just said? Maya from now waved her earlier self away, though she tried to be nice about it. Don't worry, she said. The point is, it all worked out. You're okay. You're going to be okay, really. Because she knew, better than anyone else could ever possibly know, about the knot of worry that Maya from then was carrying around in her always. How much it ached, that worry. How hard it was sometimes to be that Maya. But finally it was October, and life was back to normal, if you could ever call living half the world away from your home normal. At least the French schools believed in a lot of vacation. Maya's school had just let out for 10 full days. Yes, it was true. She had survived the whole first quarter of the school year. What's more, she had made a real, actual friend here in Paris, a dark-haired, quick-smiling boy named Valko Nikolov, who had lived for years in New York. And when she had just run up to her apartment for a moment after school to drop off her books, she had found a small stack of letters for her on the table in the dining room, so her friends in California had not forgotten her after all. And then, when she had stopped at the bakery to get something to share with Valko as they went walking across the bridge or along the Seine, the chocolate croissants had been warm. All in all, what Maya, the former champion worrier of the world, was feeling at the moment was something she hadn't felt much of in the last few weeks, or months, or years. The tingling, hopeful feeling that is the opposite of worry. Was there a single perfect word to describe this particular feeling? She wasn't sure.
If there were, it might have to be spelled like this.
Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Maya had to put a hand to her mouth to keep her smile from breaking loose as she crossed the last little street before the block where Valko lived. At that point she paused for a moment to admire the interesting new hole, outlined in jagged scorch marks, that had appeared in the high garden wall of the Bulgarian embassy last Saturday night. A transformer must have blown, Valko said with some relish, as he showed off the flashlight he now carried everywhere. Medium-sized chaos. Embassies apparently didn't like their walls exploding, even if only partially, and they didn't much care for power outages either. There were lines of police tape marking off the part of the sidewalk directly under the hole, and an exceedingly bored policeman, whose job was to stand there all day in case some acrobat decided to spider walk up the wall to the hole and then scramble through into the Bulgarians' private garden. Through the hole you could see bits of branches and greenery, and embassy windows that would ordinarily have been invisible. And what was that? Craning her neck to get a better look, Maya put her hand on the wall to steady herself. And the wall jumped. Well, not jumped exactly. Twitched, flinched, blinked. It was Maya who did the actual jumping, as she snatched her hand away from the stone. Could a stone wall have some kind of electricity coiled up in it? A secret internal alarm system trained to yell when fingers touched it? Sensitive stone nerves? None of that seemed remotely likely. But then her head was still ringing from the silent twang that had come shooting up through her fingers. It wasn't exactly like getting a shock from a doorknob after you've shuffled around a bit on the living room carpet. No, that kind of jolt is at least impersonal. The thing about this one was the wall had... Okay, it was crazy to think like this, but this was what it felt like. The wall had recognized her. Her, Maya. Her heart began to skitter under her ribs. Slow down, she told herself. Slow way, way down. She surveyed the scene. The policeman was still poking away at a rough spot on his fingernail. The wall, she moved another inch away just to be safe, was pretending to be a normal wall, if she ignored that sooty hole looking down at her from up there. Really looking at her. Not just looking, in fact, but staring at her. The little hairs on the back of Maya's neck were prickling in alarm before she realized what had caught her attention. Caught it the way a hook might catch a fish. An eye was gazing at her from that wall. The strangest eye in the world. An eye made up of gaps and stone and other even more peculiar things, all falling together into eye-ness if you stood just where Maya was standing and looked up just so. All right, it was an illusion. The hole in the wall was a sooty-edged oval turned on its side, an eye-shaped gap where stone wall used to be. But then it got stranger, because framed by that gap, the way a person's brown, green, blue, or sometimes purple iris is framed by eyelid and eyelash, was a stone figure. It was far off and high up, hunched over itself in a round iris way as it perched on its narrow, high embassy ledge, centered, if you were standing just where Maya happened at that moment to be standing, within the eye-shaped hole in the wall. Maya squinted. Could that really be what she thought it was? Yes, the iris of the wall's impossible eye was a gargoyle. You didn't expect to see a stone gargoyle clinging to the side of the Bulgarian embassy, but there it was. The gargoyle iris looked directly down at Maya through the eye-shaped hole of the garden wall. The gargoyle's own eyes were piercing, shadow-black dots, and they were the pupil of the wall's eye, and it was all like one of those sets of Russian nesting dolls, eyes within eyes within eyes, only worse, because this eye was also a trap, and Maya was caught in it. "Oh," she said aloud, startled all over again. She really must have touched a nerve or something in that wall. The gargoyle was staring at her as if it had been doing nothing since the day it was carved but waiting for her, Maya Davidson, to walk by. The air was still twanging in silent alarm all around her. In fact, a wave of strangeness was now, how to describe this, rippling out from the eye in the wall, just as the church bells a few blocks away tolled 4. Maya had grown up in California, where there are earthquakes from time to time, so she automatically scanned the sidewalk for a nice solid table to hide under. But the sidewalk had no tables. And in any case, although her stomach pitched about a little as the wave of strangeness rolled through her, the ground was not actually moving, so this was weirder than an earthquake, whatever was going on now. Something was ever so slightly wrong, but at first she could not see anything out of place. People were still walking along, still laughing and chatting or hurrying by in silence, as if nothing at all were the matter. It was like the sidewalk had turned into the deck of a very large ship, and a wave had just pitched that ship over onto its side almost, and nobody but Maya even felt the slightest bit out of kilter. And no railing to hang on to, not anywhere. "Help," she said in the tiniest of voices, because it is disconcerting to feel like the universe has just bent a little out of its ordinary shape when nobody else seems to notice. She was actually putting her hand against her forehead to see if maybe she might be out of the blue feverish or something, when right in the sidewalk in front of her there appeared the slenderest vein of sand, a twisting miniature wriggle of sand, meandering out from the wall in a lazy curlicue. She tested it with her toe, and it was really truly sand, dark sand, like lava ground down into grains of black salt. Not just a curlicue, no, it was zigzags and circles now, opening up in the pavement. She had to hop out of its way, it was scrawling about so fast, and when she hopped she collided with something that made a very displeased sound. The French policeman. "Attention," he said, his lips curled into a frown, but Maya was distracted by his pillbox hat, which was sprouting a small pair of blue canvas wings. They were the tiniest of wings. The policeman didn't seem bothered by them at all. His hat lurched upward, almost free from his head, and he gave it a smart tap to settle it back down again, as if he had been having to deal firmly with this particular hat for years and years. Maya moved well out of the way, and he strode on by, the policeman and his fluttering pillbox hat. Her own heart was still going tappity-tap, as if it had little wings too. She could see now that other odd things were happening in small doses all around. The antenna of the car parked nearest to her had, for example, quietly shredded itself into a frothy spray of metal, and was now waving its thin stalks gracefully about in the air like a skinny metallic sea creature. One single branch of the nearest sidewalk tree swelled up into a million little warty bumps, as if the bark had shivered itself into goose pimples, and out of those bumps burst the tiniest fuzz of new green leaves, completely out of place on that gray street. Even the warm, buttery smell of the chocolate croissants was remaking itself right under her nose, becoming darker and mintier. It was confusing, yes. The air was confused. There was a bewildered hum running through it. "Hey, Maya, listen," said someone very close by. "Something's gone wrong. Oh, gosh, it's so stupid. Listen." "Gash?" said Maya. But she could still feel the smile, ! Jumping back onto her face even before she had finished turning her head, because it was pretty much impossible not to smile when Valco showed up. If they ever invented a human-shaped cure for a world gone sideways, it would probably look a lot like Valko Nikolov. It would have tousled black hair and the friendliest possible gray eyes and a comfortable sort of voice. But then she looked again and saw that even comfortable Valco was clearly bothered by something. The little lines that usually crinkled where much younger kids might have actual dimples were gone, for instance. And his eyes weren't really smiling either. "Hi there," she said, feeling the ! Fade slightly away. "It all started happening like maybe 5 minutes ago. Everything got weird. Did you really say gash?" Valco did on occasion like to make up words, or new uses for underappreciated words, but something was definitely, just now, not quite right. "Everything got weird," said Valco. He didn't sound like himself. He sounded distracted. "What got weird?" "Sorry I'm late. The power just went off again in there. Chaos. Bumping around. People looking for headlamps. But listen." Maya already was listening, but Valco let the sentence trail off instead of finishing it, and then made the toe of his shoe stub itself pretty hard on the sidewalk. "The power went off," she said, finally, because it's hard to wait around as long as that for the rest of a sentence. "Gash," said Valco with feeling. "Who cares about the power? There's a backup generator. The lights pop right back on again in a few minutes anyway. That's not the thing. The thing is, my grandmother called. Not the nice, sweet grandmother. The other one. Baba Silva." He shuddered. "She has a totally incredibly huge mole right there on her cheek. I'm telling you. And she's fierce. When she frowns, you think that mole is going to reach out and whack you or something. Anyway." And then the drama faded from Valco's expression, and he was looking right at Maya, more directly and simply than people usually look at each other on sidewalks where strange things are happening, beneath walls with holes in them that if you squint just so become a lot like eyes. "I'm really sorry," he said. "The thing is, it's bad. They're sending me back to Bulgaria." For a while she just stared at him. The words hovered in the air like soot. "Bulgaria?" she echoed. "Happy first day of vacation, right? They want to send me back to live with my totally terrifying grandmother with a mole." If the world was a ship, and the ship was already tilting, all unsteady, to one side, suddenly Maya was in the water, with the cold waves rolling right over her head. She said, "Why?" But she couldn't make the sound of that word very loud. The water was too cold, and she was sinking through it way too fast. "Because I'm not Bulgarian enough," said Valco, with a flourish of despairing bitterness. "Because I've been dragged all over the world. That's my grandmother talking, right? She had a marathon conversation on the phone yesterday with my parents. My Bulgarian is barbaric. I have no understanding of the great cultural traditions of my homeland." He paused. "Hey, really, are you all right? You look a little pale or something." How is she supposed to be all right? You think things are finally getting to be sort of okay, and then the universe goes and pushes you right off the deck of a boat, and the water is freezing cold. "Did you say something weird was happening out here?" he prompted kindly. Maya, of course, was drowning in cold water and trying very hard not to do something stupid like cry, both at once. She shook her head to clear things up. The air was still humming all around them, but it's hard to care about things like random branches on random trees suddenly sprouting random fuzzy little leaves when your friend, your true friend, Your only real friend in a huge old city where you still don't really belong tells you he's going to vanish, poof, because of some dreadful grandmother. But Bulgaria, that's awful, she said, trying not to sound too clingy and pathetic. Her voice was all wobble, though. And then she realized how close she was to that scary edge where you fall totally apart and are embarrassed about it probably for the rest of your life. Haul yourself back, Maya. She hauled herself back. She stood straighter. After all, she was the very same girl, the new Maya from now, who had just been feeling all hopeful about the world a few minutes ago. Maya Davidson was the kind of person, right, who looked dangerous people in the face and foiled their evil, evil plans. One Bulgarian grandmother was not going to do her in now. Nor was one oddly seasick world. And why didn't Valko look more seasick, come to think of it? He didn't seem fazed by the strange things happening to car antenna or sidewalk trees. To judge from the expression on his face, the only thing worth worrying about was Maya herself. I wouldn't have minded so much, he was saying, back in August. But I was kind of a friendless loner back in August. Now I'd mind. I'd mind a lot. Those, by the way, are the kind of words a person can hug pretty close to her soul. Maya stashed them away and felt several notches worth better about everything, strangeness or no strangeness. Me too. But quick, look over there, she said, since kind words can melt if you stare at them too hard. See how weird that is? She was pointing at the policeman's still slightly fluttering cap. Valko looked, and then turned back to Maya, his expression friendly, but with a thin blur of puzzlement around the edges. The policeman? They've had someone posted here all week, he said. You know that. Ever since the wall went slightly kaboom on Saturday. Don't want strangers climbing into the embassy gardens, right? He paused. Listen, I'll try not to let them make me go. You know I'll try, but it's just my grandmother. Maya gave a thin-lipped nod, staying very strong. It wouldn't be right now. It would be in December. They already had a date. Cold water in her lungs, but she did it again. She hauled herself back. She made herself point one more time at that policeman. His hat, said Maya in the weird, extra-quiet voice that was all she could manage just at the moment, has wings. He's a French policeman, said Valko. He was trying to help her out of the water. That's what he was doing. There was a smile flickering there somewhere, deep in his friendly gray eyes. That's his uniform. Fluttering wings? Just part of the uniform? Maya took another closer look at Valko, and a new tendril of worry, distracting her from the cold water, thank goodness, brushed against her mind. Did he really not see how strange that cap was? And that branch over there has leaves on it, all of a sudden, look! And the antenna there shredded right up into ribbons, and something weird was happening to the pavement, too, back by the hole in the wall. Valko followed the swoop of her hand, all those strange things. But once his gaze reached the ground behind them, his eyes widened and stared. Wow, he said. He sounded impressed. Writing on the sidewalk? You? With the cop standing right there? Wow. I didn't, said Maya, but when she turned her head to look, all the rest of her thoughts withered up and died just like that. The looping black sand had finished its work. All those curlicues and angles turned out to have been busily spelling something, and the word they had spelled out there on the pavement, plain as smoke against a pale sky, was Maya. Oh, no, she said. She felt wobbly again, looking at the sidewalk's bold, confident scrawl. You think I did that? What did you use, charcoal? Chalk? Said Valko, leaning over the sidewalk to take a closer look at the elaborate, impossible Maya. Wait, that's not chalk. You wrote your name with sand? I didn't write anything with anything, said Maya. It came out sounding a little testy, but that was because of her nerves. I guess it wrote itself, after I touched the wall. I was just standing there, and I touched the wall, and the gargoyle saw me, and all this stuff started happening. Little stuff, true. Small things. The leaves on that branch were as tiny as could be, but it was all wrong, wrong, wrong. And there was the hum in the air, too. It was hard even to think properly with that hum in the air. "Excuse me, but did you just say gargoyle?" said Valco. "The one up there," said Maya, and pointed. She had to pull Valco back away from the wall so that he could see. Valco squinted. "No," he said. "There can't be anything up there. That's where my room is." "Well, but look," said Maya, "on that little ledge outside, the gargoyle. Wait, no, 2 gargoyles. I didn't see the other one before." They had just about stepped right into the street by now, trying to get a better view. "Oh," he said, and shook his head 3 separate times, like a dog confused by too much water. "But gargoyles are heavy," he said, "aren't they? There can't be a sudden gargoyle. It must have always been there, even if it wasn't. I mean, I didn't see it before. There was never a gargoyle on my windowsill. But I must have been wrong. It must have always been there, right?" "What do you mean, always?" said Maya. Valco was beginning to worry her. There are friends you go to when the world gets wobbly, and you need someone to explain again that everything is logical, really, if you study it hard enough. That was Valco. That was always Valco. And now here he went, sounding, of all things, vague. "I don't know about the gargoyles, but I told you, the rest of it just happened 2 minutes ago, when I touched the wall. Valco?" "There's got to be an explanation," Valco was saying, more to himself than to anyone else. "There's always an explanation. All right. A branch with new leaves. Why? It came from a tree from a warmer climate, maybe, and was just grafted onto that trunk today. Or a committee has been wrapping it in heating pads, maybe, at night. That could be. All those warm heating pads fooling the branch into thinking it's spring already. Or a bunch of people with hair dryers." Maya couldn't help herself. She snorted out loud. It came from nowhere at all, that snort. For 1 second she had forgotten the cold water entirely. "Why are you laughing?" said Valco, turning to look at her. But she was already not laughing any more, because as soon as he looked at her, she remembered all over again about December. "It's a scientific explanation. Hair dryers. Why not? Yes, that's what it must have been." "Stop it," said Maya. "Something's messing with your brain." It was beginning to creep her out, to tell the truth. "Oh," and he perked up a little, considering that possibility. "Really? Like seeing things that aren't there? Like that shadow thing following you?" "Shadow?" Maya spun around to look. It was true. Behind them the wind had kicked up a little column of leaves, of dust, of something. A sack's worth of shadow, hugging the embassy wall. It paused, spinning in place, tasting the air, and then began slipping along down the sidewalk in their direction, feeling its way toward them against the wind. A silvery trickle of cold raced down Maya's spine. "I wonder what the scientific explanation is," said Valco, "for that shadow." It was tempting at that moment to turn tail and run, to drag Valco away in a completely other direction. But she had just been thrown from the tilting deck of the world into a lot of very cold water, and one effect of that, it turned out, was that bubbling up inside the old, cautious Maya was a new, half-drowned Maya, a little bit furious with the unfairness of the world. "You know, gash!" So this is what she did instead. She took one reckless step toward that shadowy, lurching column, and she barked.